And Michael, we want to continue talking about this, but now South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg is taking to the stage there. And then let's you and I talk again after we've heard something of what he said.
Hosting and moderating. Thank you to Washington High School for having us. Thank you to everybody for caring enough to be part of this. We are here for several reasons. We're here first and foremost because the city is hurting, because the city is in pain, because someone among our number died at the hands of another person in this city. We're here to share information. We're here to respond to questions, and we're here to make progress. Not because we think we can solve everything here or solve everything at all, but because we know that we'll be one step closer if people have the right information and if people are heard. A couple things I should admit that I cannot speak to today. First of all, I cannot speak to whether any of the actions on Sunday by Mr. Logan or by any of the officers involved were legal or illegal, because that is being investigated separately. Similarly, I cannot speak to whether any actions by any officers at that time were in accordance with policy or against policy, because that is going to be reviewed in a separate investigation. Those investigations have to be impartial and just and transparent. I will do nothing to prejudice them. I will say that we will deal with the findings when they come. I know how much concern there is in this city over the police-involved shooting that happened last Sunday. There's also a lot of concern around this city over the loss of life that took place early this morning in our city. 10 people were shot. At least one life has been lost. Every time a civilian dies at the hands of an officer, every time a civilian dies at the hands of another civilian, and any time an officer comes to harm at the hands of a civilian, they are all disasters. It is a disaster for the family every single time. We were actually on track as a city to have less shootings than last year, and last year had less shootings than the year before. I don't know if that's true anymore. Certainly not true as of this moment. We can't bring that number down without all of us doing something about that. And I know this is part of that. We're bringing together people who care about safety and justice and believe that we can and must have both. I want to share very briefly the process that is going on. There will be more to discuss as the questions come in. That there is one process for reviewing whether any laws were broken on Sunday. That is in the hands of the Metro Homicide Unit. That another process will take place that is for whether any discipline of any officer is called for. That will be in the hands of the department and will then go to the Board of Safety. I've heard the community express two things about the process that I just want to make clear right away where our administration is. The first is a desire for an outside look at what has taken place here by the U.S. Department of Justice. I recognize that request. I respect it. I will send a letter to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division expressing that the city agrees. I cannot promise that they will act on it. Secondly, the community has expressed concern about the review underway by Metro Homicide. Because even though it is separate from the South Bend Police Department, it of course involves local law enforcement. Some in the community have asked for an independent investigator to be appointed by the prosecutor to take over. And I want to let you know that I agree with this recommendation as well, and that I notified the prosecutor that I would like for him to take that step. It is his decision, but I have let him know that I would like for that to happen and shared some of the reasons why. We're not only here because of what happened Sunday, even though that is obviously what has brought us to this point. There is a lot beneath the surface when it comes to trust and legitimacy around policing and race in our city. There's a lot of things we've done, and I just want to make sure I've named them. The institution of bias training, civil rights training, community policing efforts that have been going on for years, transparency online, and if you're not familiar with it, I would urge you to consult the South Bend Police Transparency Hub online. It's a website with information, policies, data. And if anyone has any suggestions about additional data sets to add, those will be taken seriously. We've acted to have a more professional promotions process and to raise discipline standards, which, as you may know, have included officers being removed from the force for misconduct. We've also taken efforts for diversity recruiting to make sure that the department resembles the community it serves and is more diverse, and have implemented body cameras.
It's not enough.
As the mayor of the city, I want to acknowledge that those last two lines of effort, the effort to recruit more minority officers to the police department and the effort to introduce body cameras, have not succeeded. And I accept responsibility for that. We have tried but not succeeded to increase diversity in the police department, and we need help. And while body cameras were implemented across the department, obviously there is enormous frustration, which I share, that they were not there when we needed them most. And there will be action on that too.
Quiet.
So I'll keep this brief so we can get to the questions. I just want you to know that we're not running from this. We're going to have a conversation that I hope will be respectful. I hope that everyone who speaks may speak without interruption. And I hope that, I know that people aren't going to walk out of this room satisfied. I understand that. We are here to have tough conversations. But I want everyone here at least to be empowered, and I want to make sure voices are heard. It's why we're here. And so I'm going to stop talking and go over there. Our moderator will ask some questions, and then we will move to audience questions after that. And again, I thank you for being here, and I thank everyone who is here to respectfully participate in this conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Pete, for giving us the overview. I want to ask that we would be respectful to this process. We have a lot of information and content to share, and so as we respect you from this area, please respect us as well. We're going to do our very best to get your questions answered and share information with you that I believe will be empowering on today. And so let's walk in love, one towards another. Can you look at your neighbor and say, let's walk in love, one to another. Thank you so much. I appreciate the respect that you're giving me at this time. The Bible says love never fails, and love will cover a multitude of sin. And so let's walk in love one to another so that we can have a healthy engagement. This is a time that we can communicate one to another. We're all hurting, including myself. You feeling me? We're all hurting, including myself. I've got questions myself that need to be answered. And I'm here to help facilitate those questions that we have pre-made, and then those questions that will come from the audience. And so we're looking forward to your participation as well. As the NAACP president, I think it's important for you all to know that we are an advocacy organization. And we are at the table because we believe in fair and equitable processes. And we're believing that justice will come out of this as you give us time through the process. I'm emphasizing that for a reason, because nothing's going to happen in the next 36 hours. But there's a process to this, and we want to give it time to unfold so that we can address the challenges that are before us. All right, with that being said, Let's get started with the questions to our mayor and to our chief of police. First question is, what happens after an officer involved shooting? Chief Scott?
Well, that's kind of a vague question, but from the scene itself, Metro Homicide is immediately called. They come to the scene and we relinquish the scene. Those officers that are on scene, whoever the commanders or supervisors are, relinquish that scene to Metro Homicide. Metro Homicide does what they do with any other investigation, which is to transport witnesses down and whoever may be involved and take statements at the Metro Homicide unit. Immediately, our South Bend officers, unless they're involved in an actual incident, will not be part of the investigation. Metro Homicide, it's Mishawaka.
Right, the South Bend police chief, they are taking the first question really about the sequence of events, following a police-involved shooting. We're anxious to hear what the mayor has to say. We're going to take a short break for now. We'll come back and listen to more of this town hall meeting involving the South Bend mayor, Pete Buttigieg, and also presidential candidate. Welcome back. I'm Frederica Whitfield in Atlanta. You're looking at live pictures right now of a town hall meeting taking place in South Bend, Indiana. And to the right is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, who's also a presidential candidate. And right now there are just some generic questions being asked about the procedures of police-involved shootings. The reason why they have this town hall meeting is because there was a police-involved shooting 1 week ago. A white police officer, a black man. The black man died. And then in addition, separately, a shooting that took place at a bar earlier this morning. 10 people have been shot, 1 died. And so the mayor opened up by saying, this is a city that is hurting. This is a city in pain. He said someone died at the hands of another person, that being the nucleus of what this town hall meeting is all about. But the mayor just days ago had been confronted by people in South Bend who said they want more. They want more detail about the police-involved shooting, and it goes to the core of racial tensions in that city. I was joined earlier by Michael Eric Dyson. He's back with me now, author of What Truth Sounds Like. And so I wonder, Michael, if it is, even though it's the beginning stages, we have yet to hear from the audience who is fired up. We heard people, chiming in with demands of when will there be change, to some of the points that he was making about police body cam program and diversity recruitment, which he admits he has not done well and the city has not succeeded in that. And he says, I take full responsibility for that. But then I'm wondering, is it glaring to you that absent from the fact when he talked about someone died at the hands of another person, he avoided mentioning that this is a white police officer and a black man. And, that is interesting because when you have had that dynamic historically, it certainly goes to intent. It goes to questions of prejudice, lack of value of life. Those are some of the things that come to mind. Those are some of the things that he heard from his constituents just a few days ago in South Bend.
Absolutely.
What are you anxious to hear from him in terms of detail? Well, he said he can't talk in detail about the investigations, but those are the glaring things at the nucleus of racial tensions here.
Right, absolutely. Stop punting the ball. Stop saying, look, I can't speak about this. I don't want to put my thumb on the scales of justice to weigh it. We get that. We understand that. That ain't what we're asking you. We're asking you to take a politically, publicly, moralistic stand here. And that stand says that, look, we don't want our citizens being victimized by people who are ostensibly committed to helping them to serve and protect. If we have a disproportionate number of people of color, in this case especially black people, who are victims of police-involved shootings, where law enforcement is again involved with lethal intensity in the erasure of another black life, we have to address that. To be this sanguine, to be this neutral, to be this objective by one person was, killed by another person, that's not the issue, sir, because one of them has a badge and a gun. The imprimatur of the state rests upon him. That badge, that shield, suggests that he works for the city, for the state, for the government. That means that he has an extra special responsibility to be careful in the the dispensation of justice. He is not to be judge and jury. He is not to take the law into his own hands and to execute another human being. All of these things are at play here. And beyond that, we do know that Mayor Pete fired the black police chief there. Now, why was the black police chief fired? He was fired because he was, quote, illegally wiretapping other police people that the federal government was concerned about, the FBI in particular. What was he recording them for? Because they were making racist statements. So now the very police chief who took the law into his own hands, some will say, and as a result of that was fired, the real issue that the police chief was trying to address is kind of wiggle free from the central issue here. How do we adjudicate competing claims between the police department and the citizens of this city, South Bend, who claim that they have been victims of racial bias? And let me say this furthermore. The man who was accused, the police person who killed Mr. Logan, was already cited for vicious behavior and out of control behavior to begin with toward African American people. So we have a history here that has to be acknowledged. You can't just dismiss it. You got to deal with it.
And again, if you're just now joining us here in the newsroom, we're watching this town hall underway in South Bend, Indiana. To the right is the South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who's also running for president. To the left is the police chief there, Scott Ruskowski. And audience members are soon to be asking questions about racial tensions, about a police-involved shooting involving a white police officer a week ago and a black man. And Michael Eric Dyson joining me now, really talking about how the city's first black police officer was let go soon after the mayor took office. The mayor through our own CNN reporting, that police chief was replaced by two other police officers, both white. And through our CNN reporting, we've also been able to uncover that the makeup of the police force in terms of diversity has gone down about 5% in an 8-year period. In fact, this is the soundbite from the mayor, who says work has to be done, still has yet to be done, but also had this acknowledgement about his own failings.
The effort to recruit more minority officers to the police department and the effort to introduce body cameras have not succeeded, and I accept responsibility for that. We have tried but not succeeded to increase diversity in the police department, and we need help. And while body cameras were implemented across the department, obviously there is enormous frustration, which I share, that they were not there when we needed them most. And there will be action on that too.
And you can hear the audience members there, asking when, in part. And so, Michael, we were talking earlier when we talked about, Joe Biden and, how he has been under fire for, word choices when he was trying to describe how he worked with segregationist, senators back in the day. You were making the point of acknowledgement goes a long way. And here you have this mayor who is admitting to the failings and also acknowledging those failings and committing to do something about them. Does that count for something, particularly when we're talking about the leader of a city and now one on a national stage who is vying for an even bigger office at 1600 Pennsylvania?
Right. Well, it remains to be seen. Yes, but it does make a difference. To acknowledge the problem is critical, because if you try to pretend it doesn't exist, if you do the proverbial put your head into the sand like an ostrich, even though we know that technically that's not true, then you don't deal with the problem. But here's a man who at least is committing to addressing it. Now, would he be addressing it with the same kind of dispatch and exigency that were to be the case had he not committed himself to running for the presidency? Maybe maybe not, but the fact is he is. So it works both ways. He gets a national platform to broadcast and platform his extraordinary commitment, if it exists, to this democracy, but he also has to have a stronger spotlight on him to say, what are you going to do? This is a test case. If you can't handle the mayoralty, then you can't handle the presidency. And if you can't acknowledge that there are people out there who are very upset, they're not against law enforcement, they're not against cops, they're against cops who kill and who shoot black people without warrant. They are against people who use lethal force without lethal intent, so on the part of those who are victims. So the question is, can we move beyond acknowledgement now to walking the talk? But yes, critical acknowledgement is so important to trying to get things done.
And you mentioned, you underscored, this really is a test. I mean, these kinds of investigations, no, it's not an anomaly. You know, it's not just happening in South Bend, Indiana. I mean, this is something that is, you know, swept across the country, continues to, and has for decades, I mean, you know, historically. But how this mayor addresses it and how he's able to either bring promise or bring results. I mean, what can the expectations be while he's also on the campaign trail for national office?
Yeah, that's a great point. Look, being cute, liberal, progressive, gay, are tremendous attractions and appeals to us, but it can't absolve you of the responsibility of dealing with tough questions. Neither can Joe Biden, being wizened, grizzled, and long in the tooth, and with liberal bona fides for days, dismiss the necessity for him to address this issue of race. So young and old have to understand that this is a test of not only the durability of your vision, but it's about the way in which you're able to be sensitive to the mass of African-American people who, after all, are the bedrock, the substrata of the Democratic Party. If you're willing to dismiss their interests in deference to what you think is an elusive white voter who might be outraged or ostracized or somehow feel themselves an outcast because you're paying too much attention to this issue, you are misreading the tea leaves.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but let's listen right now to the town hall, because apparently there are folks expressing themselves in the audience.
Government operates. So please, let's be respectful. Mayor Pete, yes. Okay. So let's, one last question for Mayor Pete and Chief Scott. How will you keep the community informed in regards to this process? How will we do that moving forward?
Sure, you can start and then I'll.
So it's a very difficult process to do, to even conceive, because again, when it comes to law, legalities, contract, it's difficult to give information out. However, and I've heard this, and I'm glad you mentioned this as well, when officers say that they were wrongly dismissed or wrongly whatever left the police department, for one example, as you saw, this internal affairs or administrative advisory is floating around all over the place. Those cannot be released except for court order or subpoena, or if the officer, any officer, so say for example an officer left the police department and they say how they were wrongly done, and I'm just giving an example, have that officer give me permission in writing to release their internal affairs file, and you can look at them.
Okay. Mayor Pete.
So
So let's allow for our mayor now to answer the question. Thank you so much.
So our intention will be to release as much information as we legally can as quickly as possible. So, as you know, there are moments, for example, during the investigation right now, where pieces of evidence are still under review. But I can tell you that it will be our policy that everything that can come out, come out.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's make the transition now to our Q&A part. There will be someone with a mic. I'm looking to see where that's going to be. Who's going to handle the mic for questions, or are we allowing them to come to the stage? Yes. No. I'm questioning. They were supposed to have a mic for questions and answers. Yeah. Are we wanting them to
I think
come,
there's a
Laura, to the
microphone that
stage?
will-
There should be a microphone in the audience.
Microphone will come to you.
No. Do we have one in the audience?
Say again? Okay, a microphone will come to you.
Thank you for your patience. A mic is now coming. Let me say as well that we do have the National Action Network has joined us as well. Reverend Al Sharpton and his team is here on tonight, and so we're appreciative to their presence as well. They are coming with a mic, and we are still awaiting the mic so that each individual who wants to ask questions will be able to as well articulate themselves. Here we go. All right, we now have the mic, and
let me thank everyone for your presence. And I hear the uproar and the pain. I'm getting ready to introduce myself. My name is Pastor Carlton Lynch. I serve with Reverend Al Sharpton, National Action Network. So here, yes ma'am. Yes ma'am. Yes ma'am. All we're coming to do, hold on one second.
okay. Let's give him a moment to share. Let's give him a moment.
Okay. Okay, so hold on. Come here.
Let's give him a moment.
Come here. Just stand still for me. Just stand here. Just stand here.
I'm gonna work with you.
Real quick.
Let's give him a moment.
Reverend,
Please,
respectfully-
quiet down, please.
Excuse me.
I tried to set a town hall up 3 years ago. I tried to set a town. No, I'm gonna let everybody know something. I personally tried to set a town hall up 3 years ago. Between and the community. The community reached out to the police. We got to bridge this gap between the police and the community. I personally reached. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
I didn't personally talk to you. No, it's not disrespectful at all. But you remember that. 3 days before, I set up the moderator.
Okay.
I think. Hold on, sir.
Time-wise.
I'm about to. Hey, sir. I'm
Sir.
about to give you the mic.
Sir,
Let me calm them down.
Sir.
Let me give you the mic.
someone has the mic.
Hold on. If everyone can just, we're going to allow him to speak if everyone can just calm down. All right.
All right.
3 years ago, when everything was going on with Aaron Nepper, after the Franklin case got decided, 3 years ago, I personally decided, I said, let's reach out to, the community needs to reach out to the police department and bridge this gap. And I proposed a cookout in a town hall meeting. Went, set everything up, made flyers, talked to them, got commitment from everybody that was going to be there, talked to the city, set up the moderator, the panel, everything. 3 days before that, they canceled. Hold up. 3 days before that, they canceled. In the meantime, Aaron Nepper jumps on somebody out at Notre Dame, a Notre Dame student, but that has no, we'll work on that later. 6 weeks later, they come up with their own town hall out at the Croc Center that we had. Now all of a sudden, it's their narrative. They want to reach out to the community and try and do this after they turned us down. It's not about me personally. I'm not mad about me personally getting my ideas stolen. It's the fact that the community reached out. They keep begging for us to reach out and bridge this gap and whatever else, and we reached out to them, and they said no.
Thank you. Pastor Lynch, if you would finish, and then we'll take the next person.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherry Peets, and I serve as the Director of Community Outreach. I thank you for coming here today. This is my alma mater. This is my home. So if we can allow us to come to you, to put the mic to you, so that way it's a safe and productive conversation, I would greatly appreciate that, if that's okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. And also, if I may, because I know we have a lot of questions, and we want to make sure we get to those questions and get to a place where people can share their grievances. What up, Blue? If we can do 2 minutes, if that's possible, because we want to make sure that people get a chance to have their voice heard and give us a space to listen. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. I want to say something. I know we all are angry. Well, first of all, my name is Samuel Brown. I have marched in this town. I have cried in this town. We're all upset about this. But I want you to listen to me. Please listen. You don't have to agree with me. Just
All right,
listen.
you are listening to people who are very upset, and they have expressed they are hurt and they are in pain, and they are confronting the city leadership of South Bend, Indiana, namely the mayor, Pete Buttigieg, who is also running for national office for the White House. And you heard one gentleman who got up there and said, hey, we've been trying to address the city for 3 years now, at least 3 years now, to get this kind of town hall meeting underway. And that gentleman said he got a big no from the city. And so folks are upset about the most recent police-involved shooting involving a white officer and a black man. There was also a shooting that took place at a bar this morning that the mayor did touch on. But again, the mayor has said he can't give any detail about the investigations underway, but he said as soon as he gets information, the intention is to release as much information as possible and as soon as he can. He did receive some applause there, but now people from the audience are expressing their frustration about the city addressing issues that are matters of concern. Let me bring in our CNN politics reporter, Dan Merica, who has been reporting on Pete Buttigieg, looking into years of tensions in South Bend under this mayor. And so is this the boiling point, or maybe even the breaking point for so many people in the community who have said, we want matters addressed. We haven't been able to get that. Perhaps this is a start, says the mayor, or is this, underscoring a really big problem there?
Yeah, my colleague Vanessa Yurkevich and I spent some time really digging into Mayor Pete Buttigieg's record handling the South Bend Police Department for his 8 years as mayor. And what you're seeing right now in that town hall is reflected in what we discovered and what we found from other people in the community. And it's tension, racial tension in South Bend around the police department and around the way the police department interacts with the large African-American community in South Bend. What we have found really is that this tension you're seeing, this tension has played out for the last week, has been simmering under the surface and at times above the surface for most of the 8 years that Mayor Buttigieg has been in office. It's pretty stark when you hear activists, when you hear members of the community calling out officers by name, and that's, a man in the audience mentioned Aaron Nepper. That's somebody who we looked into and in our piece get into the many allegations against Aaron Nepper and the fact that he remains on the force and how that impacts people in the community to this day. The other factor that we write about is that the police department doesn't reflect the African American community in South Bend. In 2014, 10% of the police force was African American. That number in 2019, according to the South Bend Police Department, is now at 5%. So this is a pivotal moment for Pete Buttigieg, not only as in his tenure as mayor, but nationally. He is asking people across the country to vote for him for president because of his 8 years experience as a South Bend mayor, using that as a validator on the campaign trail, talking about it often. And that's why why I think you see him during events like this saying, we need help, I made mistakes, kind of facing up to the things that he's been unable to accomplish, hoping that that honesty plays well with voters who have a lot of questions about what's going on right now in South Bend.
Sure, an acknowledgement of, we need help, but it also appears as though the people in the audience are looking for this mayor to take a more leadership role, and it seemed as though, really commandeering this town hall would be the NAACP president, who we couldn't see, but we could hear his voice, where it seems like he was in the driver's seat of how this was going, and even there were at least 2 opportunities for the mayor to step up, and he deferred to the police chief, and, that's not going over well, apparently, to a lot of the audience members who want to see this mayor in charge, taking that leadership role. Yes, saying, I acknowledge there are mistakes made, but it looks like people are craving for more in that audience.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of pain in that audience, and that's what we saw talking to people, former officers and activists in the South Bend community. And a lot of that has been brought to the surface by this shooting of a black man at the hands of a police officer last week. And you've seen that play out over the past week in South Bend. But clearly, it's something deeper going on. You can't watch the video that's happening right now in South Bend and think that that's just been something that's been created over the last week. It's something deeper than that, and it's clearly something that Mayor Buttigieg has to address in his hometown. I mean, he is from South Bend. He notes that often, that this is his home, and that's why these matters mean so much to him. But it's also something that now that he is asking people for their vote, now he is campaigning for president, it's something that will impact this candidacy. And it's significant because he announced his candidacy to very little fanfare and then very quickly got a lot of momentum and took off. And largely unabated has risen from a 1% candidate to a candidate who's in the top 5. And on the verge of the Democratic debates this week in Miami, this is a lot for one candidate who hasn't run for national office, hasn't run for Senate or House before, to be handling going into such a crucial debate in Miami.
Okay, Dan, let me just listen into what's happening right now. Let's take
Any racist is at the damn desk. Put them at the desk, make them do paperwork, put the people that care about the fact that you're different than me, honey, I love your hair, make them the ones out there on the streets.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. May I respond to that for just a second?
Thank you. Yes. Yes, Mayor.
Let me respond to that. You might stay around just while I'm responding. You go back to your seat? Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for that. And I appreciate that what you said is specific and actionable and constructive. I will say that if anyone who is on patrol is shown to be a racist or to do something racist in a way that is substantiated, that is their last day on the street. And I would love to be able to finish. I would love to be able to finish my reply if that's okay. I would appreciate being able to finish my reply. I believe you have described a specific tool that can be used in order to identify indications of racism. It is not familiar to me, and so I thank you for bringing it up, and I will research it right away. Any tool that can help the city make good on the promise I just made is a tool that we will want to know about.
Thank you. You have the mic? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Please, everyone.
The truth never want to get heard, but we're going to speak it today because in order for justice to get served in the correct, appropriate manner, the truth must go forward. So since we want to have church for our churchgoers, hold on, because that's going to be the first minute. I'm going to sum this up real quick. In the book of Proverbs,
all right, so as
chapter
audience
8,
members are
verse
continuing
21,
to ask questions of the mayor directly about their frustrations. I want to bring into our panel, we've got Michael Eric Dyson, who's still with us, and then we've got CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. And Ron, I understand that you have been part of forums across the country while on the campaign trail, and race has been at the core. And now being evaluated is, how is Mayor Pete Buttigieg handling this on the local level, and does this exemplify how he would be able to manage racial tensions that continue much more broadly on a national stage?
Yeah, in my Atlantic hat, we have had forums around the country on criminal justice reform, and it's very clear that there is no issue that is more volatile and explosive in our cities than police use of force, particularly in communities of color. And the kind of issues that you hear in South Bend are really evident in cities everywhere. I mean, I think, urban America is becoming more blue than ever. The top 100 counties in America accounted for over half of all of Hillary Clinton's votes. But within that kind of blue consensus in the cities, there is this very jagged divide, and we've seen it in city after city, and it's exacerbated by the fact that many of these cities are achieving economic growth that they have not seen in decades, and yet very little of it is benefiting their own kids from low-income and minority neighborhoods. And it's become, I think, a kind of very volatile combination that is evident even in South Bend. Dan could probably speak to that more than I, but certainly something that you see behind, kind of underneath the kind of immediate flashpoint like they're experiencing there right now.
Right, left behind, not something that, is historically distant, but a continuation. And so, Michael Eric Dyson, one of the gentlemen who was talking about, hey, look, I tried to get a town hall going 3 years ago, and he talked about the Franklin case, and I tried to look up quickly to see what he could be making reference to, and it may potentially be this Deshaun Franklin case, in which a young man, I believe he was the age of 22 at the time, he was killed after police officers entered his family's home without a warrant. And so if that is indeed the case that he was making reference to, it is still a deep wound. I don't know the outcome of it because I haven't been able to discern, the path, during this 3-year span. But if what people are trying to have addressed with the mayor is, it's not just the police-involved shooting from 1 week ago, but while you were mayor 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, there were other issues that arose involving police-involved shootings, white police officer, black, subjects, and victims of the investigation. So he is being asked to address a problem that has history there under his leadership. And so is this going well for him right now?
No, not at all. No, not at all. Here's the point. And it's extremely important to make this point. He's not grappling with 20 years of history, although that accumulated pain can be heard viscerally seen there today. It's during his own administration. What he has failed to take note of. What Brother Ron talked about, the bluing of urban America, how ironic. It's blue, all right, not only in terms of its demographics in regard to Democratic versus Republican, but it's blue in terms of the thin blue line that is thickened across the horizon of urban America, where black people are being increasingly policed, where their bodies are potentially vulnerable to not only rebuff, not only to being handcuffed, not only to being batoned, but being tasered and then sometimes ultimately killed. So this is a tremendous problem. There's nothing more important than this volatility that we see being expressed there. And it would be wrong for most of America to look at these people and go, oh my God, they can't even sit still and listen to the mayor. How can we calm the nerves of the people? I'll tell you how you do it. By not dismissing the legitimate concerns they have on a daily basis, where because they have been unheard, now it comes to this convergence point where it is spilling over, where the nerves are frayed, where the calmness has been dismissed. And so, yes, the mayor has a lot of splaining to do, so to speak. And this is really really him looking into a mirror, seeing that he has failed abysmally, and now this is not going well today. It's out of his hands. He makes specific and sporadic interventions, but he doesn't feel the pain of the people in a way that causes him to have a moral creativity to address it beyond legality. Don't just recede into niches of legality. Speak to the broad, sweeping problems that are confronting the people there.
Right, because it sounds like people are saying this moment is now revealing, because whether it was a couple days ago when people in South Bend approached him directly and challenged him with what have you done for us lately? I mean, why have you not addressed matters? And then you have people making reference to other cases, not just more recent, but in recent years. What's revealing here is they are challenging him about what's your motivation for caring about us now, because they are saying you have not done enough to demonstrate that you cared about us before you got on the national campaign stage. So let's listen to what's being asked and what he's being challenged with right now.
Please give us the space to share that information with you. I want to continue with the questions you have, and then we'll go back to the Q&A, please.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for bringing us up to date and positioning us as to where we are now. So let's ask a question about resources. Well, let's talk about trust. How do we bring trust back to our police force? So, Mayor Pete, if we could address that, because it's going to be important as I look at our community. Obviously, our police department is here to serve and protect. But if we can't trust our police department, that's difficult for them to do, and it's difficult for us to have a relationship of any kind when there's no trust. And so I believe that trust has been broken in our community, and we have to do something about it to regain the trust. And we can't just have this kind of a meeting and we walk away and not commit ourselves to a process that will bridge this gap. And so I believe that question is critical.
So let me tell you some things that I think might help, but let me also acknowledge that the entire community will have to be empowered here.
Sure.
I've shared some of the things when I spoke earlier that we've done up until now. It's also clear that we have a long way to go. I do want to clarify that Chief Ruskowski has my confidence. Let me mention a few things that I think are examples of areas we could work on together. And I would love to hear more, either tonight or in the weeks that are going to come. There are several areas where we know there's a lot of concern in the community, where there's a policy or a practice or both that the community may not have confidence in, and that we could invite the community to help us reshape. I'll mention 6. One is the use of force. There's a written policy around the use of force. Is it the right one? Could it be improved? We can have a community process to look at that. Number 2, we've talked about this a lot, but I'll just mention it briefly, cameras. So obviously, there is a lot of concern about what it takes to have confidence that body-worn cameras are doing what we intend them to do. The third is the process for investigating an officer-involved shooting. We've described the process, the way that it works, that it goes to Metro Homicide, that the prosecutor's in charge of deciding if charges should be filed before any of it goes to the police for discipline. That is not the only process we could have. If there is another process that community members would believe is better, that might lead to more trust, we should explore that. The fourth out of the 6 is the investigative process more generally. When there is a complaint about an officer, who do you complain to? How do we determine if that complaint is valid? There's a process for that. We can explain and describe that process. Perhaps we can also improve it. The Board of Safety, the way that works is in the state law. But that doesn't mean that that's all there is to the story. There are things we can do before or after or around it. For that matter, we could, including
All right, Mayor
including
Buttigieg
different
there
forms of civilian
ticking off
review.
what he believes would be 6 areas in which the community can help him in reshaping, how to move forward on addressing some of these issues. So let's bring in national correspondent Jason Carroll. He is there. Jason, this audience not holding back. They've been very anxious about addressing these things with the mayor. What's the perception in the room about how the mayor is handling this?
Well, look, this audience is angry. There's no question about it. They're angry with the mayor, angry at the chief of police here, and not listening to the head of the NAACP, the man who's moderating this town hall. There have been several outbursts throughout this entire town hall from people who simply are fed up. I mean, one woman told me she doesn't feel as though there's enough transparency with this department. You've heard a number of people shouting down the head of the NAACP, shouting down Mayor Buttigieg, as well as they try to explain what they're trying to do to get this department back on track. The mayor has already made it very clear at the top of this meeting. He said, look, we've not done enough. He's not done enough to try to get this department to be more diverse. The department is predominantly white. You've got a number of people in this community, Frederica, who feel as though there are members of the police department who are racist. They want them removed. The mayor and the chief of police tried to explain that there's a process for this. If there are allegations of police misconduct, if there are allegations that officers are racist or have used racially insensitive language, there's a process to remove them from the force. But there's been such a history of mistrust here in the community, between the community and this police department, that you've got folks here who are impatient, quite frankly. They don't want to wait for the process. What they're looking for is immediate action. So what you have now is you've got the mayor trying to explain the steps that he's going to take to go forward to try to get this department back on track, and you've got a very frustrated audience. Frederica?
Yeah, frustrated indeed. All right, Jason, hold tight. I want to bring in Congressman Ami Bera is joining us right now. You, Congressman, dealt with an officer-involved shooting in Sacramento. That is your district. You were actually invited on to talk about something else, but, you can relate to what's happening here. And when we hear, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who says, I want to hear from you, audience, about how I can empower you to be part of the process. Do you believe that this is helpful at this juncture in this town hall setting, that this is what people want to hear about how they can be empowered to be a part of the process somewhere down the line of reform? Or were they looking for more immediacy from this mayor about addressing their hurt and their pain?
Just kind of listening to the town hall, the emotions are very raw right now, and I think Pete is doing what he has to do by allowing the audience to express themselves. What we went through here in the Sacramento region with the tragic death of Stephon Clark, an unarmed African-American man, the emotions were raw. They're still raw today, and the community is still healing, and it takes time. So I think, I know Pete Buttigieg. I think, he's an honest, upright individual who is doing the best to give the community the space to express the anger, frustration, and emotion. I think you've got to create that space.
Mm-hmm. Because, it's not just Sacramento, it's not just South Bend, but we are talking about, a national issue. We're talking about, police-involved shootings that have happened in so many different communities, and we hear from a variation of communities who talk about their frustrations, particularly when it talks about when at the center is the disproportionate number of black individuals, mostly black men, who are killed in police-involved shootings. And you heard from people in the audience there who said, wait a minute, Mr. Mayor, we've been trying to address this for a very long time. This is not an anomaly, what just happened 1 week ago, but this has happened on several occasions. So for the mayor to be, addressing this from an executive leadership in that city is one thing, but this is a microcosm of what's taking place nationally, and he's running for the presidency. How he handles this,
I agree.
Will be measured far differently because he is running for national office. Do you agree?
That's what these investigative
I agree. Certainly, this is a test of his executive leadership and what he does in a difficult, volatile situation. Obviously, the President of the United States has to make decisions like that every day. What I can share is how we started the process of healing as a community. Our police chief, Daniel Hahn, did a great job of being as transparent as possible. And I think that's incredibly important in situations like this. Because if the communities that are frustrated and angry feel like you're hiding information from them, that's just going to feed into that anger. And again, I think both Police Chief Hahn here in Sacramento, the Mayor, Darrell Steinberg, tried to be as transparent as possible. And that would be the advice that I would give Mayor Pete, is be transparent, try to include folks in this, and try to make the community part of the solution.
Yeah. Well, he proposed that, but you heard from one individual there who said, trust. Trust is a big issue right here, and many people in the community say we're not even sure whether we can trust the leadership, the city. All right, everyone, stay with me. We're going to continue to monitor there. You see that it is pretty heated there at that town hall in South Bend. I'll be back with my guest right after this. All right, welcome back. Well, a big test for South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who coming off this week said it was a challenging week. Well, that was before this, what has turned out to be a very contentious town hall meeting there in South Bend, where people are expressing their concerns about trust, lack of trust, and lack of trust into an investigation underway involving a police-involved shooting of a white police officer and a black man 1 week ago. Let's listen in.
With this process? Yeah. So I think we have a win right there. Is that right? All right. So we're going to now go back to question and answer. We have about 10 minutes or so left. There we go.
Yes, thank you so much. We're going to take a few more questions. And Blue, would you like to have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All power to the people. All power to the people. My name is Blue Casey, founder and president of the New Black Power Movement in South Bend, also the founder of Free My Park Youth Foundation. I'm also a shooting victim of last month on Mother's Day. They shot my recording studio up 16 times. I caught 2 of them. One in my backside that came out, one in my foot, had a bullet in my foot for a whole week. I worked with the city on numerous occasions. I was just an employee of the city this past summer and fall for community development and resources. So when I say this, everything I'm saying is not biased at all. Mayor Pete and Ruskowski. And Ruskowski, we didn't have conversations on numerous occasions. When I got shot, I wanted to make sure that you knew that I got shot. We just heard all of this in 2016. And I wish, as much as I love my city, because Lord knows everybody told me since I got shot, I need to move my black self back to Atlanta. But, bye, motherfucker. Listen, like I was saying, I want to say that I love this city. I want to say I love this city so much, and I want to support y'all, but I refuse to lay down my respect for these people out here that's hurt. To say something that's photo op and say something that sound meaningful, but it ain't. The same process that y'all been telling us to trust, y'all told us in 2016 when we was protesting Aaron Nepper the first time. The same process that y'all asking us to trust, so how can we trust this process? How can we ask another black man to go join the police department to try to be part of the change when sexual harassment charges inside of the South Bend Police Department? Y'all promote the bad officers and demote the good ones. Y'all got racism inside of y'all police department. How are we supposed to trust this? How are we supposed to trust this? Mayor, when that young man got killed over there, ran over at the stoplight, what did you say? What did you say, Mayor? You dang near blamed him. How can we supposed to trust you? How can we? And you done partnered with a lot of the stuff that we done did with my organizations. I understand that, but when you mess up, we gotta also call that out too. When the city mess up, we gotta call that out too. And our people is hurt. Dr. King said everybody out here want to be Martin Luther King scholars, right? Dr. King said a riot is a voice of the unheard. I'm not encouraging a riot, but these people is unheard. These people is unheard, and that's why y'all getting the reaction y'all getting. So stop telling people shut up. Stop telling people how to feel. Because y'all don't, I'm not feeling the same way we feeling. I've been fighting the same fight with these people for 6 years. I had to stop New Black Power because we got retaliated against. I got retaliated against for trying to fight against the Aaron Nepper case. My girlfriend, at the moment, got chased down by police, pulled over. The police come to the car. Hold up. The police come to the car.
Seconds.
The police come to the car and say that's not her when they pull her over. They retaliate against people when they fight back in the city. How can we trust y'all? When we get retaliated against for fighting against y'all, how can we trust y'all? Y'all got to change that. I told y'all on Friday to do your jobs. If you want our votes, which I doubt you're going to get it, do your job just so you can have a moral compass when you leave this place. Wiskowski, do your job so you can have a moral compass when you sleep at night, dog. Because right now, the streets is crazy, man.
Blue,
all praise be to Allah.
Appreciate you and your time.
Thank you so much. And I know that 2 minutes, 3 minutes is not enough, and I apologize for the lack of time that we have, but I know, Mr. Geiger, you have a question, or did you were able to ask the question? Or if I may, Blue, was there a specific question that you wanted them to respond to? Nope? Okay, you just want to make...
I just want to know, now, the council approved monies for the body cameras, right? This was years ago, right? When this was passed through, Henry Davis Jr. brought this up. A number of people brought this up, right? I would like to know why, according to the company that produced the body cameras, it says that once a shot is fired, it's supposed to record. Now, when we were at WUBS, right, and the family was speaking on the air about this, Councilman Oliver Davis Jr. actually read the article from the South Bend Tribune that reported that you all had said that, the body camera, this is what it was for, it's equipped with this technology. However, in that conversation, a news reporter who was conversing by text with a police officer, I don't know who, you all said that it didn't have that sensor, so it wouldn't go off. And we just want to know why. It was paid for in full. You all said, and you wrote the policy, right? You wrote the policy in the duty manual, right? We're not even, we want to talk about that too, right? Like, how are there all these loopholes, right? Like, oh, it's at the officer's discretion if the cameras turn on, turn off, the headlights got to be on, they have to flick a switch, all this stuff, right? And then it's like, well, maybe they could, maybe if it's bad enough, yeah, they could record the situation. Why wasn't it already mandatory in the policy that you record every interaction with citizens? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's paid for. You already knew people were upset about it, so it should have been dealt with. And one last thing. I'm sorry. One last thing. Since you fired Boykins for a federal investigation, if there's a federal investigation, Wiskowski should be fired.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let me try to respond to the question.
Go ahead, Mayor Pete.
So if I understood your question correctly, it's about a feature where when a gun is removed from its holster, that automatically activates the body camera. Is that correct? No. I'm sorry, I cannot hear Jordan speak if you're shouting over him. Please.
When a shot is fired.
When a shot, I don't know that has.
So, Jordan, good question. That technology exists, but it's not implemented. I asked. I had the same questions that you did, and I called the company myself, and I talked to them myself, and their best guess for the implement.
Let him talk.
They don't even have it testable yet. It will not be rolled out until the spring of this coming spring, is what the company told me. You can call and check and ask them with them. Same thing that I did. Call and ask them.
So it's going to be really hard to respond to Jordan's question if we can't hear him.
Thank you all.
We're going to go ahead and move on, unless you have anything else you want to add, Chief, Mayor. I'll move on to the next resident, actually.
No, I want to know who wrote that in the duty manual.
Right, so
Who left the loophole? You're the policy law, right? You're the policy expert.
The policy was approved by the Board of Safety. I do not know who drafted it, but I believe that it was drawn from model policies from around the country. And again,
So it was copy and paste, right?
per the general order, my view is that under the current policy, when an officer on a call encounters a civilian, the camera should be activated.
Ma'am.
Okay, Mayor Pete, that's it for your answer, correct? All right.
So we're going to go to Ms.
Okay, we have the mic going to the next person.
I want to give a very specific recommendation that you might be able to embrace. A great example is that I'm an elected official representing the district who happens to be the district in which this tragedy occurred. And I find it hard to believe and sad that it's hard for me to step up here and take the mic. I think one of the problems that we're experiencing here today is that when I first came on the council 4 years ago, we had that meeting that the gentleman referenced earlier. So that was about policing. That was about some of the officers who are currently, we're addressing right now. It's been 4 years and there's no action. In fact, there's a problem still with those specific officers. So what I think my specific recommendation is that you begin to think about ways, and those ways have been, over the last 4 years, brought to you by the same people that I see speaking here tonight and yelling tonight. They're yelling now. They're yelling now.
Please.
They're yelling now.
Our councilwoman
because
speaking, please.
they haven't had the opportunity to speak to you in a way that gives you that information. So,
please.
and I'm hearing all of that. So this is my specific suggestion, is that when I see you in front of the cameras, or when I see who's on the list to invite to the table for conversations, I see the same black people over and over and over again, year after year. And yet the people who are in the audience when you have these public forums are the same black people, but they're not invited to the table. And I think that it's time for you to rethink who you think the leaders are in this black community. Not to say that the people you chose for the Board of Public Safety aren't leaders, that their opinions aren't valid. Not to say that our esteemed president of the new NAACP doesn't have an opinion. But when you continue, as any leader, when you continue to go to the same people and you have anointed them as the voice of the black community, you are leaving an entire group of people out. And so, my specific recommendation is that you investigate ways to be more inclusive. And I don't think it's too hard, because everybody knows Jordan. Everybody knows Jordan, because he has been on the front line of this since he returned to this community from graduate school. There needs to be more meaningful conversations with a more diverse group, because what you see tonight is that African Americans are not monolithic. We do not have the same ideas, thoughts, and opinions, and we do not have the same experiences across the country, or especially in this community. So whereas we can choose a group to stand behind us, and then it looks like, oh, well, yeah, black people endorse this or that, I think it's really important for you to figure out ways to connect with the Jordans, with the Goos, with all of these people who are out here. Tiana, who spoke to you earlier with a very specific example, she has been doing that work for I don't know how long she's been trained. And this is a specific example we've been trying to bring to you. How do you address those things? And so we've spent 4 years, even before I was on the council, the Citizens Review Board was actually put in a resolution. and by the Common Council to say, let's investigate that. Yes, it is. And so this specific example is that you look at those things, that you go back and we don't wait. Because my question is, how long? My question is, how long before you take action? And you respond to what the community has been asking for years, a citizens review board, period.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Due to the interest of time, well, Mayor, would you like to respond to that? We do have 2 more questions. We have been running on time.
Yeah, I'll be brief. First of all, I welcome the spirit of that suggestion. I'm always trying to get more voices to be heard. I don't want to seem defensive, but we've taken a lot of steps. They clearly haven't been enough, but I cannot accept the suggestion that we did nothing. If it were not for the conversations we had, we might not have done what we did on bias training, civil rights training, community policing, introducing the cameras, the online transparency. But I acknowledge that it has not been enough. I would like as many different voices to be at the process as possible. That's why we do Mayor's Night Out. It's why we're here, even though not everybody would advise some of these means of soliciting input. I would also say to activists who want to be heard, who haven't felt in the process, please accept the invitations when you are invited. Some of the specific individuals you have named in your commentary were invited to my office and decided not to join. And that seat at the table, I want people to know that the seat at the table is waiting for you. And I would welcome more input from you on how I could do a better job at making people feel that they're actually welcome when invited to that table.
Thank you, Mayor. Next question is from a resident from South Bend.
Hi, I have 2 questions, one specifically for the police chief and one specifically for you, Mayor Pete. First of all, the citizens of South Bend paid for those police cameras, correct?
Yes.
Okay, millions of tax dollars went to those police cameras, right?
Yes.
And when you rolled them out for us, when you had the big news, the press conference, and said how good they were and they were going to work, well, they failed, and we don't get our refund. That's one. 2, the second question is, what's the standard procedure for transporting a gunshot wound victim to the hospital after he's shot by a police officer and transported by police officers after the ambulance had been called? I want to know the procedure for the transport, and when will we get our refunds for the debunked police cameras that are not working for our communities? Because you know what? I am afraid that is not what's supposed to happen in America, in Indiana, in 2019. Please address the 2 specific questions that I've asked you today, and thank you for your time.
So
we do this bit about the cameras, and I'll take the transport. Yeah.
You want
so
me to
what?
repeat it?
Let me start. May I start with the transport that you're referring to, and everybody's well aware of it. Absolutely, whatever any officer can do that they believe is right to save somebody's life, in their belief, then I'm behind that.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, I want to hear him, please. Please, I need to hear this. So let him please tell me, because those are my questions. I need to hear it. I'm not being selfish. I just want to be informed on what the policy is. Please let me hear his answer.
On the policy, and I will tell you that specifically, I spoke to, I don't want to say the 2 doctors' names I spoke to. They will hopefully come forward somewhere in the future, had talked about, and what it's called, and this is blunt, it's called load and go. As quick as we can get somebody within that golden hour to the operating room, not just the ER, to the operating room is the most optimal time we can to save somebody's life. I don't know if those are the exact circumstances that happened Sunday.
When will you know so that you can inform us?
Yes, ma'am.
When will you know, so you can inform us? Is that investigation still ongoing?
Everything is still with the prosecutors. Any video, any body camera, and there may be body camera and in-car camera video of all the things that happen out there. Maybe not one specific officer, but all the officers that responded out there. Yes, I would look forward and I would hope that I would receive that from the prosecutor, that they're using that as their investigatory evidence in a criminal case. We as well would use that within our internal case.
Okay, and the only thing I have to say to your answer, thank you for answering me, is this is sounding a little Laquan McDonald-ish to me, because in 2014, this happened in Chicago, where they said there was no camera, and there was camera, there was footage. And then once everything started rolling downhill, when it got leaked that there was dash cam footage, then people started resigning and getting fired, and the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, quit being the mayor because there was a cover-up. So I just want to make sure that you are aware that we're looking for no cover-up. We want transparency, total transparency in this case, because Eric Logan got my sympathy and condolences to Eric's family. Eric Logan did not deserve to be treated like this.
Yes.
I heard that.
So a few things I just want to mention. One is, and I know people don't want to hear this, but I need to tell, but I do need to tell you something that is truthful. And I'm not commenting on this case because we're waiting for the facts on this case. But in some cases, it has been recommended that when waiting for an ambulance, it is better to just have a police officer take them in, and that there's a better chance of saving their lives. I'm not talking about this case. Yeah, and we will research that and put that out, because I know that's important. Secondly, about the cameras. And I should also say, look, we have to wait for the prosecutor's part, right? So we've been notified that they did not find body camera footage from the officer of the moment of the shooting. There may be other footage to work with. Dash cams from afterwards. I don't know what it might tell us, but I want you to know that as that emerges, there will be transparency. The next thing is, you're saying, can the city get its money back? Because we bought a technology and the public was given a certain set of expectations, and those expectations were not met. If the failure was a failure in the technology, then you could hold the company accountable and ask for your money back. Or could I please continue? It's possible that the technology worked as it is supposed to, and the failure was somewhere else. There could be a failure in the policy. There could be a failure on the part of an individual to adhere to the policy. Again, I can't speak to the specifics of Sunday's incident now because that's under review. But I guess my point is, it could be any of those things. A failure of an individual, a failure of the policy, a failure of the technology. We will find out. But if anybody's trying to figure out who to hold responsible, the administration bought the technology, hired the officer, and wrote the policy. So at the end of the day, I'm responsible. Lastly, what you said I think is really important, and it's what's at stake today, and I know we're going to have to wrap up for now, but obviously this is the beginning of a conversation that will continue. But when you say that
Ladies and gentlemen.
When you say that your grandson is afraid when police pull up, that is the biggest thing that we've got to change. Good. Well, hopefully, when he's old enough to be mayor, he will look back on these moments as when we found a way to start moving toward a day that I want him to see. I want to see it too, but I definitely want him to see it, where a black child and a white child, or a black adult or a white adult, when they see or hear a police officer or vehicle feel the exact same thing and feel safety. And we're just not there. And I'm doing everything I know how to fix it. And the chief would not be the chief if I did not have confidence he's doing everything he knows how to fix it. And obviously, we're not there yet. We can't do it alone. We can't do it without the community. But I believe in this community. And places all over the country are trying to get a handle on this. And if anyone can do better than the rest of the country, if any community can fix it, or at least make more progress than the others, I believe that South Bend can be that community with your help.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go to another resident who has a question.
I have a few questions for the mayor and the pastor up there.
Yes.
First of all, trust has to be earned.
That's right.
Secondly, how can a pastor ask police chief whose thoughts are of the world console people who's been hurt? You go to the church for that. Pastor, have you been out there to comfort them?
I've been.
Have you went to the other churches to comfort them? Have you? So don't look to the world to do your job.
Those churches have pastors.
Don't look to the world to do your job. It's a spiritual thing.
It
and
is.
you know that.
That's right. And that's
And
why
as
I
far
spoke
as
of
you, DeJedge, yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, I heard you said if the cameras were working. And I heard the police said that they turn on the camera for a certain situation. Didn't you get a 911 call and say that he was breaking out windows or what have you? Isn't that the time to turn on the camera? Where the situation we in now is because of those tapes for years ago. You talk about racism that you probably don't have in your department? Yes, you do. Did you listen at the tape to find out who these were? Is he one of them? So how are we going to trust anything you say?
I'm sorry, I apologize, I was not able to hear the question.
Then you said that Ken Carter, the prosecutor, may be over certain things. I know Ken Carter. He's the biggest liar in South Bend. He cannot be trusted. I know him. I know for a fact he cannot be trusted. So, Pastor, when you tell us what we need to do, as a man of God, because I know the word,
yes.
You get out there and comfort them families.
I'm out
you
there
get the
every
rest
day.
of them other pastors together and get
fact,
out there
let me
and
share
walk the
this
beat
while
like
you're
Paul and
raising
Timothy
that
did.
question. I've been meeting with the family, the Eric Logan family, and other families in our community. So since you did not know that, I want to make you aware of the things that I have been doing. I have a church that I pastor. There are pastors here that pastor their own church, and they give them spiritual guidance. So I appreciate you letting me respond to your question. If you ask me a question, let me respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have, if I may, with the help of the National Action Network, they have been helping in regards of collecting some questions, and I know that we have been going over with some of the questions, so I want to at least get a few in, if I may. The first one is, since you mentioned the failed efforts to diversify the police department, what will you be doing next? So that is both to the mayor and the chief, if you would not mind.
Yeah, so I can tell you one idea is that we have a CTE with the fire department. And some have said, can we have a CTE program with the police department for the same purpose, to get more applicants, young people interested in law enforcement. The reason it hasn't been possible up until now is you got to be 21 to be on the department versus 18 in fire. But because we've really been pressing this issue, the police department leadership has come up with the idea of having a sort of joint CTE that gives people a career in law enforcement with the county or in some way short of being a police officer to bridge those 3 years until they're old enough to become a police officer. And it's one example of a measure that would help create a pipeline. But this is one where I promise you we have tried everything we can think of. We've even placed online the data about how many applicants of each racial background come in and then fall out at each stage of the process. And if there's things we haven't thought of, which there must be, we need the help of people in this room and people in this city, because we cannot expect there to be the comfort level we need unless the police department actually reflects the diversity of the community that it serves.
Thank you. Ma'am, thank
May
you.
I as well, Sherry?
Yes, you may.
Because what the mayor is
Yes, you
referring
may,
to
Chief.
at the police department.
If we may, please, thank you so much.
Through our diversity and inclusion, matter of fact, spearheading everything has been Christina Brooks. Through all of our resources we have at the police department and through the sheriff's department, to the mayor's point, you can't become a sworn police officer until you're 21. However, working with the sheriff's department, you could start as early as 18. With that being said, that's not the important part. The important part is it's called homegrown. Our neighborhoods bringing their recommendations to us and through us when the homegrown program is how we start to make that change. I don't know if it'll work. We're just now trying it. We've tried everything. And one most important thing, and anybody that knows me in this room has heard me say it a million times, and here comes 1,000,001, community inreach. We've done outreach after outreach and keep getting pushed away. We'll open our arms for the inreach to help us. I have been begging, and if I have to do it again today, and I am doing it again today, I'm begging you, please help us change what needs to be changed.
Thank you so much. We do have one more question from a fellow resident, and then we'll have Mayor Peake make closing remarks, please.
First of all, I want to say everybody in here may have different views. We are all hurt, but we all have different views. We got to remember that if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. Now, if I were to fall right now, I would say, ow, I would scream because I'm in pain. But then after that, I need to put a Band-Aid. I need to put solution. There's process to the healing process of it. First of all, I want to take the time to thank everybody that's been here right now and that's voicing their opinions and that's hurt and that's voicing that. Because without your words, change won't come. Without your pain being expressed, there would be no change. Closed mouth doesn't get fed. So for that reason alone, I thank you for coming and voicing your opinion. Now, like I said, there's a process to it. The pain has been heard. The remarks have been heard. So now with the man here, and when we're all here, sitting, waiting for a plan, waiting for suggestions on how we could change this, this is the time for this now. Now one last thing I want to say is, for everybody that's here supporting either cause, is what kind of friend are you to the cause? And I want to say it like this. I could have a friend that is getting ready to make a decision. It might not be the best decision for him, but he might make the bad decision because he's hurt. It's pain, just like us right now. We're hurt. A good friend would change the direction of that friend and say, hey, I know you're hurt, but instead of contributing to what you're about to do, look, this is the real way to solve it. And not many of us can do that. We have a lot of friends that are going to go the wrong path, and instead of being the bigger man and saying, hey, that's not the way you do it, as a friend, I'm telling you that this is a better way. That's the same way I want to apply this to this cause. We could come here and we could yell out. We can. But unless we educate ourselves and our people that we care about on how to follow the process, we won't have any change. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you so much.
Mayor, you would not mind making some remarks?
So, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. And I need everyone to participate and stay involved. And I cannot promise you that you will be happy with every choice we make, but I promise you that every piece of input will be taken seriously. Every voice will be heard. And I believe that the city can do this. I believe the city can break new ground in what it takes to deal with a crisis that so many communities are feeling. So you can decide whether or not you believe in me, but I believe in this city. I believe in you, and this is part of it, and we'll keep it up. And I thank everyone for caring enough to be part of this, and I thank everyone for believing that there's a way forward in our community, because this is our home. So thank you.
Chief Scott.
Before we dismiss, we're going to actually ask Apostle Patton to close us in prayer, but I do want to
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. King said we must accept finite disappointment.
You're live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York, and as you've just been witnessing, anger and frustration is boiling over today in South Bend, Indiana, at a town hall meeting with Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Now, on the face of it, he hoped to address rising community outrage about last weekend's fatal police shooting in which a white officer shot and killed a black man. But the audience there was not having any calm discussion of police policy. We are now hearing from Mayor Pete Buttigieg just after his town hall, after he was confronted by an emotional crowd there in South Bend, Indiana. That was called in the wake of a fatal police shooting. Watch this.
Thanks for coming. Mayor Pete, how do you feel this went today, and how do you feel you conducted yourself?
Well, there's a lot of pain, and you can feel it. You can sense the pain not only around this incident, but around our history, and not only around our history as a city, but what's happening everywhere when it comes to the disempowerment that so many Black Americans have felt in relationship with police. And obviously that was expressed in a lot of ways today. And when you lead a city and it's hurting, you take that on board all the time, but you especially take that on board at a moment like this. But it's also part of a conversation that's got to happen. And there were some things that surfaced that can be dealt with, things that were proposed that we can follow up on. And as painful as this conversation is, it can also lead somewhere real. And that's going to be my focus.
Mr. Mayor, what we seem to hear over and over again is that a lot of people felt as though they were in the same spot where they were a few years ago, back in 2016, when they were asking for some of the same things, and the feeling is that, why are we in this position where we are today?
We've done so many things over the years. Obviously, it hasn't gotten us to the point where there is full trust or even the level of trust that we just need. But it's not for a lack of action. It's not for a lack of steps that we've taken, working with the community to make a lot of things happen. It's just not been enough. And this is a national problem, and it is a local problem. And we are stepping forward every way that we know how. But I get why people are not satisfied, because I'm not satisfied either. I just hope it's understood that it's not out of any lack of trying. It's a lack of getting to where we need to get.
It is a national problem, as you say, so I'm wondering, where do you think you now sit with African Americans, not just here in South Bend, but given what has happened here, how do you think this is going to impact your stand with African Americans, not just here in South Bend, but nationally as well?
Right now, I'm not really thinking of the politics of it.
Oh no, it's not just politics. I mean, I'm just wondering, but you have to think about that. A number of African Americans are sitting at home, they're watching this, they watch the town halls, it was taken live, and so you have to think in terms of how what happened here tonight is going to impact those African Americans who watch what happened here today.
Well, what I hope African Americans watching this see is that our city is facing this. We're not running away from it. This isn't theoretical for us. This isn't something being debated in Washington. This is our problem, as it is a problem in so many places. And we are on the front lines of it. And we're doing everything we know how and figuring out things we've never thought of before to manage it. This problem has to get solved in my lifetime. I don't know of a person or a city that has solved it, but I know that if we do not solve it in my lifetime, it will sink America. And if nothing else, I hope people know that I am motivated, not out of some theoretical concern or some political imperative, but as somebody whose city is hurting. Seeing people who I've known for years, anguished, frustrated, upset, angry at the city, angry at me, and I'm angry too. And if nothing else, I hope people can see what it is like for a city to face up to the demons that racism has unleashed on the ability of any city and certainly any police department to function.
You just talked about on the morning show about violence in general, gun violence being down, and now you see what happened this weekend. How do you respond to that, and what was it in this town hall tonight that sticks out? Something that you know is going to hit your heart and you have to adjust, you have to respond.
So in terms of the incident overnight, it is, after the progress that we made this year and last year, it is a reversal. And by the way, these two things are connected. Part of how we stop a cycle of violence depends on victim and witness cooperation. That depends on police legitimacy, which depends on trust. All of these things are connected. And the other thing I know is that everybody in that room, who may not agree on much, wants safety. And safety has no color. And we have to figure out as a city and as a country how not to be facing gun violence day after day and week after week. I'm sorry, I'm a little fried. What was the other thing? Oh, the moment that stick. This will stick with me from beginning to end. I mean, this is an experience where a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, but also a lot of ideas came out. Some of those are ideas we've been wrestling with for quite a while. A couple of things I heard were completely new, which is why I'm glad we did this. It's a strange thing to say because this was not pretty, but it's better than not doing this because people need to be heard. And you can tell that there are people who spoke up tonight who, no matter how many council meetings and mayor's night outs and other events we did not feel heard. So this is one step that helped in that direction. And people obviously have a lot to say.
Mayor Pete, with emotions so raw in South Bend right now, do you feel that you can leave your community this week to participate in the Democratic debate?
I am planning to participate in the debate. I will also obviously continue to serve this community to the best of my ability.
Was today just, I mean, you seem sort of just upset by it all. Is that, would that be an accurate description of how you feel?
Of course I'm upset. A man died in this city at the hands of one of the people in charge of protecting the city. And I'm not commenting on who did what with or without policy or what was legal or whatever, but one died in this city at the hands of an officer. And this, I can only describe it as a demon that is in so many parts of American life, but especially when safety is concerned, and especially in a diverse community like ours, has reared its head. And as somebody who loves this city, whose job is to cheerlead everything good that happens in the city, who's proud of the city, to also be here when that kind of hurt is being poured out. And to know that part of my job is to be there for that, to listen, to have that poured on me, to have even people I agree with hurl all of their anguish and frustration at me because I represent the city, and the city has not solved this problem. Of course I'm going to feel that.
Can I ask, I've according to them before, I've never seen a mayor stand in front of people who are like really being very raw. Why are you doing this?
I just think it's my job. I don't know if it's smart or not. I don't know if it's strategic or not. But it's my city. And I have a relationship with everybody in the city who looks to the city to keep them safe. And when somebody loses their life because of a civilian or because of an officer, and it's happening all over the country, but it's happening here, then I feel like it's my job to face it. I'm sick of these things being talked about in political terms, in theoretical terms. Like it's a show sometimes. It's people's lives. And the good news is, if you can call it good news, there's more propulsion, more momentum to deal with this than ever. So if there hasn't been the will to take on the kind of steps, or even figure out the kind of steps that should have happened by now, knowing that no city has fixed this, no city has fixed racism, but some are doing better than others, then maybe there's a sense of urgency now that will help us do some good. And maybe the level of attention on this now will help us do something. Because everybody's got to be part of it. And there's just no running away from it. Not for me.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you.
A very emotional Pete Buttigieg there addressing reporters following his town hall that got really heated with community members who were frustrated and angry over the shooting death of a black man in their community by a white officer, and now confronting problems when it comes to racism and excessive force with policing, as some have seen it there. So we'll continue to follow this story much more